The day my daughter-in-law converted my bedroom into a home office while I was visiting my sister, I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my room, the room I had been sleeping in for 9 months, and I looked at the standing desk where my nightstand used to be, the ring light set up in the corner where my rocking chair once sat, and I thought, so this is what invisible feels like. My name is Josephine. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years teaching high school English in Columbus, Ohio, and I thought that meant I knew something about patience, about reading people, about knowing when a situation was beyond saving. Turns out there are some lessons you only learn when they happen to you. My husband, Gerald, passed away 3 years ago, pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to gone. That's all we got. We'd been married 40 years, and then suddenly I was alone in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs with a mortgage I could manage, but a silence I couldn't. My son Arthur called me 2 weeks after the funeral. "Mom," he said, "we've been talking. Vanessa and I want you to come stay with us, just for a while. You shouldn't be alone right now." I should have asked more questions. I should have asked what a while meant, and whose idea it really was, and what exactly stay with us looked like in practice. But I was 64 years old, and I had just buried my husband, and my son was on the phone saying he wanted me close, so I said yes. I sold the house 8 months later. The market was good, and Arthur was encouraging. "Mom, you're paying property taxes on a place you're not even using. It doesn't make sense." He was right, mathematically. I netted $218,000 after everything settled. I put $180,000 into a CD and kept the rest liquid. I moved my things into Arthur and Vanessa's spare bedroom in March. Their house was beautiful. A 4-bedroom colonial in Westerville, good school district, 2-car garage. Vanessa had decorated it from a catalog, everything matching, everything in its place. My furniture didn't fit the aesthetic, so most of it went into storage. I kept my grandmother's quilt, a small bookshelf, and the framed photo of Gerald and me on our anniversary trip to Bar Harbor. The first few months were fine. Vanessa worked long hours at a marketing firm downtown. Arthur commuted to his engineering job, and their son Connor, my grandson, 9 years old and sweet as anything, was at school most of the day. I cooked dinner most nights because I liked to cook and because it felt like contributing. I helped Connor with his homework. I did the laundry on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I told myself I was part of the household. Looking back, I think I was the household. It started small, the way these things always do. Vanessa began leaving notes on the kitchen counter. Little post-its. "Please don't use the good pans for bacon grease." Then, "The dishwasher needs to be run before 9 p.m. The noise bothers me when I'm working late." Then, "Josephine, I've reorganized the pantry. Please don't rearrange things." She never said any of it to my face. Always the post-its. I told Arthur about the notes one evening when she was at her yoga class. He rubbed the back of his neck the way he always did when he was uncomfortable and said, "Mom, she's just particular about the house. You know how she is." I did know how she was. I was learning more every day. By month 4, I had been quietly removed from the family group text. I only realized it when Connor mentioned something about a dinner reservation that weekend. Some place called the Worthington, and I had no idea what he was talking about. I scrolled through my messages. Nothing from Arthur. Nothing from Vanessa. I asked Arthur about it that evening and he looked genuinely caught off guard, which made it worse somehow. "Oh, I think Vanessa must have accidentally." He didn't finish the sentence. He texted her from the other room. I was added back without a word. We went to the Worthington that Saturday. It was a nice place, linen tablecloths, the kind of menu that doesn't list prices. Vanessa ordered for the table without asking what I wanted. When the appetizers came, she told a story about her colleague's mother who had moved in with the colleague and, quote, completely disrupted the whole household dynamic. She laughed. Arthur laughed. I smiled and ate my soup. The changes accelerated after Vanessa got promoted to senior director in January. It was a significant achievement. I genuinely told her congratulations and meant it. She had worked hard for it. The promotion came with a raise substantial enough that she mentioned it 3 separate times in the first week. Once at dinner, once to her mother on speakerphone while I was in the next room, and once, and this is the one that stayed with me, while showing her new business cards to Connor. "Mommy's the boss now," she told him. "You were always the boss," Connor said, and she laughed and hugged him. I was sitting 6 feet away, reading my book. Neither of them looked at me. 2 weeks after the promotion, Vanessa's company offered her a stipend to set up a dedicated home office. She had been working from the kitchen table some mornings, which she complained about. The solution she arrived at, and I want to be precise here about the sequence of events, was announced to me on a Tuesday morning while I was eating breakfast. "We're going to need to repurpose the guest room," she said. She didn't look up from her phone when she said it. "My work needs it. We'll figure something out for you." The guest room was my room. My clothes were in that closet. My books were on that shelf. My books were on that shelf. My grandmother's quilt was on that bed. "Figure something out," I asked. "We're thinking the pull-out in the basement. It's actually really comfortable. We tested it when my brother visited." She set her phone down and gave me a bright, rehearsed smile. "It'll just be temporary while we figure out a more permanent arrangement." I looked at my coffee. I looked at the post-it on the cabinet that said decaf only after 3 p.m. I said, "I'll think about it." She blinked. She had not expected that answer. I want to tell you something about what happened inside me in that moment, because I've thought about it many times since. There was no dramatic revelation, no music swelling. It was quieter than that. It was just a specific, clarifying sensation of understanding exactly where you stand, and realizing that you have been choosing not to understand it for a very long time because the truth was inconvenient. I was not a family member in this house. I was a fixture, a convenient one. I cooked, I cleaned, I watched Connor when they needed me to. I stayed out of the way when they didn't. And now the fixture was being moved to the basement because a stipend from a marketing firm was worth more than my dignity. I called my sister, Phyllis, that afternoon. She lives in Pittsburgh, has for 30 years, ever since she married a man who turned out to be worth keeping. I told her what was happening. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Joe, how long are you going to let this go on?" "I don't know," I said. "How much money do you have?" I told her about the CD, about the $38,000 in my regular accounts. "Then why," she said, with the particular patience of someone who has been waiting a long time to say something, "are you sleeping in their house?" I didn't have a good answer. I'd been telling myself it was about family, about being close to Arthur, about Connor needing his grandmother nearby. But sitting in their driveway in my car so Vanessa wouldn't hear me on the phone, I understood that none of those things required me to disappear. I spent the next 3 weeks paying very close attention. I started writing things down, not dramatically, just a small notebook I kept in my purse. The Tuesday that Vanessa asked me via text message to please not watch TV in the living room after 8 p.m. because the sound carries. The Thursday that I overheard her on a work call describe her home as finally having the right setup now that the office situation is sorted. The Saturday that I was not invited, not even consulted, when Arthur and Vanessa took Connor to his cousin's birthday party 2 hours away and I spent the day alone in the house running their laundry. I was their housekeeper, an unpaid one with a pull-out couch waiting for me in the basement. And then there was the Sunday. Arthur's firm had a spring banquet, the kind of corporate event that requires a ticket and a dress. It was a big deal. He'd mentioned his division had won some kind of performance award and the whole team was being recognized. I assumed I was going. I had a navy dress I'd bought specifically for occasions like this. I asked Arthur the week before about the time and whether I should arrange for Connor. He said very carefully that it was a +1 event and that Vanessa was going as his +1 and that they had arranged for Connor to sleep at his friend's house. "I could just come," I said. "I don't need a ticket just to, Mom." The way he said it, gently, like I was misunderstanding something obvious. "It's really a couple's thing." I nodded. I said I understood. I went to my room, the guest room, still mine for another few weeks apparently, and I sat on the edge of my grandmother's quilt and I thought about Gerald. He would have hated this. He was a quiet man, but he had a particular look he got when he thought someone was being treated poorly. a kind of stillness in his jaw, and I could see that look in my memory so clearly it almost felt like a presence in the room. I opened my laptop. I had not looked at Zillow in over a year. The apartment search took me 4 days. I knew what I wanted. A 1-bedroom, ground floor if possible, pet-friendly because I had been thinking about getting a cat. Somewhere within 20 minutes of Connor's school because I still wanted to be in his life just on my own terms. I found a complex in Dublin, Ohio. Brand new, good management company, a small patio. The rent was $1,340 a month. With my CD interest, my social security, and the small pension from my teaching years, I could cover it comfortably. I could do more than cover it. I applied on a Thursday. I was approved by Friday afternoon. I told no one. The moving company I hired was local, family-owned, the kind that sends 2 polite young men who wrap your grandmother's quilt in paper like it's something precious. I scheduled them for a Tuesday because on Tuesdays Arthur had an all-day project meeting and Vanessa had a standing lunch with her team downtown. Connor would be in school. I would be gone before anyone came home. But first, I wanted to look for something. A few months before Gerald died, during one of those evenings when we both understood what was coming but weren't saying it out loud, he had opened the fireproof lockbox he kept in the back of the closet and walked me through everything inside. Insurance policies, the deed to the house, his will, a letter he had written to each of our children. He showed me all of it slowly, like a man making sure someone understood the directions before he had to leave. What I had remembered from that evening, imprecisely, was that Gerald had once helped Arthur with a down payment on the Westerville house. Not a loan, a gift, because that's the kind of man Gerald was. But I also vaguely remember Gerald mentioning something about a condition he'd attached, something about wanting to make sure I was protected. I had not thought much about it at the time. Gerald handled those things, and I trusted Gerald completely. I found Gerald's copy of the paperwork in a manila envelope at the bottom of my suitcase, exactly where I had put it after cleaning out the house in Columbus. I had never opened it. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, Vanessa's kitchen table, and opened it. It took me a moment to understand what I was reading. Gerald had not simply gifted the down payment. He had structured it, with a real estate attorney apparently because Gerald was thorough in all things, as a conditional contribution to the property. The document was a recorded deed addendum, filed with the Franklin County Recorder's Office. It stated that in exchange for the $45,000 contribution toward the purchase of the property at the Westerville address, I held a recorded beneficial interest in the home, entitling me to occupancy rights and, in the event of a sale, a proportional return on the contribution, adjusted for appreciation. My name was in that document. I had rights to that house that Vanessa didn't know existed, that Arthur, I was now fairly certain, had forgotten existed if he'd ever fully understood them to begin with. I sat with that for a long time. I want to be honest about what I felt, because I think it matters. There was satisfaction. I won't pretend there wasn't, but it wasn't the mean kind. It was more like the feeling you get when you find your footing after a long time of not being sure where to step. Gerald had thought of this. He had sat with an attorney years ago and thought, what if Josephine needs protection? And he had done something about it quietly, without making a big thing of it, the way he did everything. I photographed every page with my phone. I put the original back in the envelope, and I took it with me. The movers arrived at 8. They were done by noon. My new apartment was 11 miles away and had a patio that got morning sun. When Arthur called that evening, he sounded less confused than I expected. More like someone who had been prepared to be embarrassed and was now experiencing it. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm home," I said. "My home." "What? Why didn't you tell us? We would have helped you, Arthur." I kept my voice even. "You were converting my room into a home office. You didn't ask, you just told me." He was quiet. "I need you to know I'm not angry," I said, because it was mostly true. "But I need you to understand something. I have the paperwork from the contribution your father made to your house, all of it. I'm going to have an attorney review it next week." Another silence. Longer this time. Mom, I'm not saying this to threaten you. I'm saying it because your father made sure I would have options, and I think it's important that everyone knows those options exist. I paused. I'd like to have lunch with you and Connor on Saturday. Just the two of you, if that works. He came. He brought Connor, who ran across the parking lot and hugged me around the middle and said, "Grandma, your apartment smells like cookies because I had baked snickerdoodles the night before specifically for this reason." We sat on my little patio in the April sun. Arthur held his coffee with both hands and looked at me for a long time without speaking. "I didn't handle this well," he finally said. "No," I agreed. "You didn't. I kept telling myself it was fine, that you were fine. I know, it's easier to believe that." He nodded. He looked like his father around the eyes when he was being honest with himself. Something about the way he went still. "I'm sorry, Mom." I believed him. I think he meant it. Whether he would have found his way to that apology without the gentle reminder about his father's legal foresight, I genuinely don't know, and I'm not sure it matters. What matters is that I learned something, late, but not too late. I spent 41 years taking care of other people, my students, my husband, my children, and then, at the end, people who had stopped seeing me as a person at all. I was good at making myself small. I told myself it was kindness. It wasn't. It was fear. Fear of being a burden. Fear of conflict. Fear of taking up space I might not be entitled to. Gerald knew something about me that I hadn't admitted to myself. He knew I would need a document. He knew that love, even with people who love you, sometimes needs a foundation made of sturdier stuff. My cat's name is Gerald. He is a grey tabby and he has no interest in post-it notes or standing desks or what time anyone runs the dishwasher. He sleeps on my grandmother's quilt in the morning sun on my patio, and some days I sit beside him with my coffee and I think, this is what it costs to finally feel like yourself. 9 months and a move, 11 miles east. It was the best deal I ever made. I keep the documents Gerald prepared in a folder on my bookshelf now, not hidden, right there next to the novels I've been meaning to reread for years. Some mornings I look at it and I think about the kind of person my husband was, the kind who handled things quietly, without drama, without needing credit, because he was simply decent all the way through. That's the word I keep coming back to. Decent. It's an old-fashioned word, and I think we've let it get away from us. What happened to me in that house? The post-it notes, the group chat, the basement pull-out? None of it happened because Vanessa was a monster. I want to be honest about that. She was ambitious and so focused, and she had learned somewhere along the way that people who don't object can simply be moved around like furniture. That's not evil. It's just a failure of something, a failure of paying attention to other people as fully real. And the truth is, I let it happen. I made it easy. Every time I said nothing, every time I smiled at the dinner table and pretended I hadn't heard, I was telling her that this was acceptable. We teach people how to treat us. I taught her wrong for 9 months before I finally corrected the lesson. What changed everything wasn't anger. Anger had been there for a long time, simmering under the casseroles and the folded laundry. What changed everything was clarity. The moment I understood, sitting in my car in their driveway on the phone with Phyllis, that I had the resources and the capability to leave, and I had simply been choosing not to use them. That choice had felt like love. Looking back, it was closer to fear, dressed up in generous clothing. Gerald's document taught me something he probably intended as practical protection, but it also taught me something he may not have realized he was saying, that thinking clearly about consequences, even difficult ones, even ones involving people you love, is not coldness. It's care. It's the kind of intelligence that builds something lasting instead of just feeling good in the moment. I had spent 9 months being emotionally available and practically invisible. What I needed to be was both clear-eyed and courageous at the same time. The courage part, that's what I'm most proud of, if I'm being honest. Not the document, not the attorney, not even the apartment with the morning patio. The courage was the Tuesday I called the movers. The courage was every hour I spent not calling Arthur to explain myself before I was ready. The courage was walking out of a situation that was comfortable enough to stay in, because comfortable and right are not the same thing. And I had confused them for too long. I'm 67. Gerald has been gone 3 years. My grandson Connor comes over on Saturday mornings now and eats my snickerdoodles and tells me about his week. And it is the best part of every month. Arthur and I talk more honestly than we have in years. Some damage repairs itself slowly, if you give it the right conditions. The cat is asleep on the quilt, the sun is on the patio. I made my own coffee, exactly as strong as I like it, with no note on the cabinet telling me otherwise. It turned out that what I needed most was simply to act like someone whose life was worth protecting. Once I started doing that, everything else followed.